Welcome to our Let's Talk. The session today is Designing QRIS for Equitable Impact, how Louisiana created alignment to improve quality at scale. I know there's been a lot going on across the country in the past couple of months, and our panel of contributors and I were just talking about how hard it's been to settle into the daily routines and to be fully present for this conversation. And we appreciate that all of you came to the session today. It will be posted. But also we do want to acknowledge the turmoil and all the activities and things that have been going on nationally. I'm Deb Mathias from the BUILD Initiative and the director of the QRIS National Learning Network. Welcome to our session today, Designing QRIS for Equitable Impact, how Louisiana created alignment to improve quality at scale. I'd like to thank the Alliance for Early Success and other generous funders for making this learning community possible. We began this series for state quality administrators and leaders to support their essential work within states around quality early learning systems building. Today, we have colleagues registered from over 35 states and territories. We intentionally keep the sessions small to invite conversation and sharing. We hope these calls enable us to illuminate challenges, innovation, and promising practices. We're interested in your questions, ideas, thoughts throughout the session. So please enter your ideas and questions into the chat box just as soon as something strikes you. If you have a resource to share from your state or work, please include a link. States have been working with providers to support continuous quality improvement efforts using a variety of strategies, initiatives, and processes. Tools such as the class can be used for accountability, measuring improvement within a program, and as a great source of data for program improvement. In this session, we're going to focus on Louisiana, on the Louisiana experience, and how one state tackled supporting providers to improve quality for children and families. We plan to have an opportunity to discuss questions and ideas after the session sparks conclude. I'd like to introduce our session contributors. Nasha Patel previously served as the Deputy Assistant Superintendent of Early Childhood Strategy at the Louisiana Department of Education. She led strategy to increase access to and the quality of childcare and education for children in Louisiana through the state's unified Birth to 5 system. Paula Polito is the owner and director of Berry Cherry Tree Development Center in the greater New Orleans area. Her advocacy work includes serving as the advisory board chair for the Louisiana Department of Education and being a commission member for the Louisiana Early Childhood Care and Education Commission. Amanda Alexander is the Vice President of Policy and Partnership Development at Teachstone. Prior to joining Teachstone, she held senior leadership roles in the District of Columbia Public School, including Deputy Chancellor and Chief of Elementary Schools. And finally, Cedra Spano is the Director of Partnership Development at Teachstone. Currently, she supports states in the South and Midwest with their implementation of class. And now, without further ado, because this is such an interesting conversation, I'd like to turn it over to Amanda to kick us off.
Thanks, Debbie. And before we begin, I do want to acknowledge the tragic events that took place yesterday on the Capitol. And on behalf of Teachstone, to let everyone know that we stand in solidarity with all of the law enforcement officers those in the Capitol and around that space that were affected by that incident, and they are in our thoughts and prayers. I want to tell you a little bit about CLASS. CLASS, of course, is an acronym, and I know I'm speaking to a crowd who is very familiar with CLASS, but it's the Classroom Assessment Scoring System. It's a measure that is used to improve teaching quality. It looks at the effectiveness of the interactions that take place between teachers and students and children in classrooms. It aligns with measurement for professional development and is thus a tool that can be used to improve what we do in terms of PD for teachers. And last but not least, CLASS is highly researched. There are over 200 research studies that speak to its effectiveness. It is well documented in the research. I also want to use this as an opportunity to let everyone know in this webinar about our Interact Summit, which will take place this year, March 23rd through the 25th. This is an annual conference that we have for class observers, instructional leaders, coaches, administrators, and all those at all levels of ECE leadership. It's a wonderful opportunity to learn about best practices in other jurisdictions and exchange ideas. And the details are here concerning registration, but I will highlight that registration does open on January 14th. And that we are also currently accepting proposals through the 18th of this month. And the link is there for more information. I'm going to turn it over to Nasha Patel, who I have had the privilege of getting to know recently, so that she can talk a little bit about the work in Louisiana. Nasha.
Yeah, hi. First of all, I want to echo what Debbie and Amanda said. I know that it is hard today to show up to do work, and yet so many of you work on behalf of kids and families in need, and we have to show up every day for that. So I really appreciate everyone being here and doing the work that you do, even in the face of significant uncertainty in our nation's capital. I am talking today about Louisiana. I formerly served as a leader on the early childhood work there and was part of our efforts to build a unified quality rating system that was driven by the CLASS tool. And when I say quality rating system, I also want to say the improvement side of it, which I know Paula will be able to talk about a little bit too. But first, let me talk a little bit about our system and the results that we saw. And then we can talk a little more in conversation, answer some of your questions, and speak a little bit about what sort of the Louisiana story may provide to you all in your individual context. So when we chose CLASS as part of our QRIS, or really the driver of our QRIS, when we made significant changes to it back in 2014, we were looking for a tool that could make sure that it could be used equitably across our system, across childcare, Head Start, and public and non-public pre-K. We were looking for a tool that could be used in a unified quality rating system and make sure that, you know, a 3-year-old is a 3-year-old is a 3-year-old wherever they were being served. They, the experiences that they were having was being measured and then supported to improve, and that all teachers could come to that, whether they had a bachelor's degree, a master's, or a high school diploma. They could come into that classroom, learn what they needed to learn, and be sort of better supported to have high quality interactions with kids. We knew that the CLASS, from the research that was cited before, we knew from the CLASS measured the elements of the classroom experiences that mattered most for young children's development and learning. It was correlated with child outcomes, and that was our number one goal, was to improve kindergarten readiness. And we wanted to make scalable and sustainable systems and supports for implementation that would help ensure fidelity and impact. And we wanted to make sure that when we built our system, we were building it with a strong focus on investment in continuous quality improvement at the local level. So in Louisiana, what that meant was we had a system of community networks in every part of the state. We call them parishes, but they're more commonly referred to as counties, we had a community network, which meant every provider that took public funds to serve children, childcare, Head Start, public and non-public pre-K, had to be part of their community network and had to work together to observe classrooms, to count children, and to work on improving the quality and experiences that kids were having, birth to 5. When we built our quality rating system and we used class as the foundation of that, we knew that we could, with investments in local communities, build significant expertise in those closest to kids and closest to classrooms, the people who walked the halls of the centers in the schools every day, who were in and out of the classrooms with those teachers every day. So we were building opportunities to support continuous quality improvement at the local level with the choice of this tool. And so when we talk about why we built the system the way we did, why we built a quality rating system that really relied on class, that used class to describe the quality of what was happening in classrooms, and then we aligned all of our sort of resources, professional development, and opportunities for improvement to the outcomes of our quality rating system, we really wanted to make sure that we were supporting the learning of all children. We wanted to make sure that the tool that we were using could be used for infant classrooms, for toddler classrooms, and for pre-K classrooms, that we weren't sort of segmenting people's attention or awareness. People in classrooms and in centers and in schools often don't have the time or capacity for multiple sort of lenses of quality. We wanted to make sure that we were using sort of like a continuum of quality description that could start at birth and could go all the way into kindergarten. We wanted to make sure it worked across all systems and sectors. And so oftentimes people think about the QRIS as just being for childcare. They think about something like class as just being for school-based pre-K. And really we found that we could use this tool. We could rely on the experience and expertise that Head Start had already developed in this tool as we were thinking about scaling it, but we could use this tool in childcare, in school, in Head Start, and it worked across all of the systems and all of the sectors to support growth in quality, which ultimately meant it supported increase in quality of the child experience, which leads to increased child outcomes. And we use class to measure the quality at all levels. So when we say that, what I mean is that programs didn't have to reach a certain benchmark before we started measuring them on class. We used class in all programs at all levels, both to describe quality and to target improvement. And really, in our programs who struggled with class, we targeted additional improvement, additional coaching, additional resources. And so it was important and essential, I think, that we were not sort of segmenting only the high performers to be evaluated on class, but really everybody was getting that kind of clear feedback that could be used to improve outcomes for kids. And then, as I've said a little bit in the other 3 bullets, we worked really hard to align improvement resources to the needs of the communities being served. And this looked different depending on the needs, but we funded multiple opportunities to build expertise at the local level. We ensured that there were trainers of class in each community, that they could then train others and build expertise. We funded opportunities to pilot the coaching models that Teachstone makes available that are aligned to class, and then continue to build that expertise. We ensured that the folks who were providing the most support to childcare centers, including our childcare resource referral agencies and our mental health consultation work, was aligned to the work that we were doing in class. And we thought significantly about how we could reward and incentivize our workforce as they were staying in the programs that they were in, as they were attaining CDAs and other teacher preparation credentials, of how we could support them to be successful within our QRIS, and how we could reward them to stay in the classroom and be successful for multiple years, as we know teacher turnover is a challenge. So we thought really hard about all of the resources that we were making available for improvement and how we could align them to the thing that we were saying programs needed to improve on, which is the experiences of children and the quality of adult-child interactions in those classrooms. Before I go any further, Paula, I would love it if you could A, talk a little bit about your own credentials and experiences with the class tool, and then B, sort of name how this looked for you and for your program, both from rollout to where you are now.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nasha. And again, echoing all our other presenters' comments on the recent tragedies. So deep breaths are extremely important these days. But yes, so when the QRIS system class was rolled out in Louisiana, it was a bit daunting at first, to be honest with you, as a provider who serviced over 150 children a day. The wealth of information came quick and it came fast. But what I will say to that is it was the first bit of research-based information that we knew once putting in place in our classroom was going to net big results. And so for the first time since I took over my child care center in 1999, I had just rich information that I could then deliver to my teachers to have that high quality interaction in place. I loved the class tool so much so that the first class I sat in, as I sat through it, I said, I've got to do this one day. I've got to know this so much to deliver it to people. And so soon thereafter, I began training with Teachstone directly. So I am now trained as a trainer. I am able to deliver the infant, toddler, and pre-K tools. So obviously reliable in all three of those tools. I am a MTP or my teaching partner coach. So I'm able to deliver that one-on-one sort of coaching based on dimensions and domains for teachers specifically, as well as a class-based coaching coach. So I have truly embedded myself in class. But I think one of the most important things to share is what Louisiana did is sent that information to the local level. Those local leaders then sent the directors to get empowered themselves. So a director was able to come back to their center with this wealth of information. And not only did it really begin to legitimize the work we were doing, right? I mean, for so often, for so many years, we've been considered babysitters. And this really moved the needle for us. This was an opportunity for us to say, we're not babysitters. The impact we make on children is so incredibly important, and it means so much. And this tool shows us that. So really empowering the directors, within each center, I saw as a big game changer with class. And so basically that's sort of kind of where we started. Again, initially the information seemed very heavy at first, but as you began to understand it more and see it in action, it was well worth it.
Awesome. Thanks, Paula. And I would say too, when Paula talks about being a trainer and embedding it in her own sort of classroom and center, that's not sort of the limit of what she did. She was also a community leader on the class tool. She actually trained me in infant class when it was my turn to get trained. And I'm so appreciative of the work she did to say, okay, if this is the direction that our system is going in, let me make sure I understand it, and let me make sure I can lead my center, my community, and the communities around me in making progress towards improving quality. And so when I say local leaders were empowered to become experts on this tool, Paula is a perfect example of that. So when we talk about measuring quality using a QRIS system, one of the central tenets to Louisiana's revised and unified quality rating system was that we were going to be very focused. And so the number one, really the only factor that is used to make a rating for a center is the class score that they get. And we measure every classroom twice a year. So local observers are measuring classrooms twice a year, and then we have third-party observers who measure classrooms, at least 50% of the classrooms in every site, and at every age. It reaches about 70% of the classrooms at least once a year. And so what that means in Louisiana is that we're not saying, or we weren't saying, think about 20 different things and how you can improve on 20 different things. We said, think about adult-child interactions and how you can improve on adult-child interactions. And over time, we got even more specific with that. We got more specific when we looked at our data and we looked at, okay, what within emotional support, what within instructional support, what within responsive caregiving, all of the different sort of domains, what can we look at across our data? And we would have over 14,000 observation data a year that we could look at and say, what does our data tell us at the state level? What can we give back to our community and local partners so that they can know what the data tells them about their programs? How do we get focused so that teachers are getting focused feedback and focused next steps on what they can do to improve, and they're not sort of bombarded by 60 million things that they need to do every day in the classroom when they already have the really complex job of taking care of multiple children every day. This led to a couple of things. One thing I would say that was an unintended consequence of this was the shared vocabulary that class lends itself to. When I would go into centers and schools and programs and I would ask teachers about the class, they would respond specifically using the language from the tool about what they were working on, whether it was self and parallel talk or whether it was, making sure they were giving children choices, just the different examples that they would use from the tool itself and the language that they would use. And that was being shared across different environments was really powerful because it meant that when school systems were providing professional development and technical assistance around the class tool, anybody from the community could join, teachers from Head Start, teachers from childcare. And B, that when somebody was giving these teachers feedback on what they, what their classroom looked like, they were getting feedback in the same language multiple times a year, multiple years in a row. And they were sort of able to internalize that and to set goals for themselves on how to improve. It became so well known, in fact, the sort of the amount of feedback that the teachers were getting, and that this was a thing that could be helpful, that could help you become a better teacher, that actually we had, when we started, we were only using it in toddler and pre-K classrooms because the infant tool was so new. We actually had infant teachers asking us, when is it going to be our turn? When are we going to start getting observations so we can get this feedback and we can grow too? So I think that's a really powerful, I think, like, endorsement of this idea of like stay focused, be really clear and really transparent on the growth that you want to see and the quality that, like, the vision of quality that you have for your system. And you can actually increase an investment in getting there, and you can get further faster because people actually know and can wrap their hands around what you're trying to achieve in your system. Paula, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, certainly. Just, for those providers that are on the phone now with us, it really truly legitimized that work. So as Nasha alluded to, it's that specific feedback. So no longer am I walking through classrooms saying, wow, you did a nice job. It was, wow, I really appreciated the increased awareness and responsiveness you gave that child when he was upset. And it just really does lift the industry up a little bit. So I think that's important to just kind of note, Nasha. Again, it's changing and moving the needle in this industry that has sort of been quiet for so long.
I spoke a little bit about this on the last slide, but we wanted to make sure that our system was scalable, sustainable, and impactful. Part of that meant ensuring programs receive data to drive improvement on a regular basis. We built a portal. It was, not the fanciest portal. We are still a state agency, but we built a portal that allowed directors and community leaders to be able to access their class observation scores in real time. It was typically about 3 days after an observation occurred that the scores would be entered into the portal. So that's how we got the data, that's how they got the data, and we built reports into the portal so that they could see not just, the raw scores, but they could also learn a little bit about like trends. They could see their information rolled up. They could get it in such a way that they could do sort of analysis on that data in real time themselves, which I think is really important, right? So I sat in a training, or actually I led a training with some of our community leaders, and one of our community leaders in one of our parishes said she went through the class data and she went cycle by cycle so that she could see what were the activities that teachers were doing where they were scoring highest and lowest, and how do I then provide specific targeted support for the activities like circle time, where teachers were scoring the lowest. How do I help teachers know and understand how they could improve their interactions during that time? And so just being able to have that data in real time in ways that, you know, they could manipulate it themselves, they could understand it themselves. They could see sort of teacher by teacher, classroom by classroom, program by program, where there were, you know, gaps, and also where there were leaders, right? Where they could send their teachers to observe classrooms that were exemplars, even within their communities. I think that sometimes QRIS systems become black boxes for data. And so I can't recommend enough building programs for transparency around the data. And we had folks who would sort of knock down our doors for it if it wasn't posted within 3 days. You know, I had an observation a week ago. Where is my scores? Where are my results? So, you know, it wasn't just that we were putting the information out there, but people actually were accessing it because they really wanted to know and understand their performance. We invested a lot in communities in our community approach. So we didn't sort of train 40 people in Baton Rouge and then deploy them across the state. Rather, we gave a lot of our grants to communities to build capacity around the tool. And we had a strong focus on leadership. So Paula named that in her community, there was a strong investment in getting directors trained. And really, they were one of the leading communities to do this in the state. But that's really what happened, right? So local communities became people who could train the trainers. They then trained a bunch of folks to become experts. Those folks really bought into the tool once they saw the videos, once they went through the trainings. They went and trained their teachers. They went and trained other directors in their communities. And so through that sort of method of local investment, expertise in the tool spread. In Louisiana, we had 1,200 observers conduct observations in any given year for the quality rating system, which means that 1,200 people were versed enough in the tool. That means that those closest to classrooms and closest to kids knew and understood the vision for quality that Louisiana was driving towards, and could provide that feedback to teachers, not just through formal observations on the class, but also in their daily interactions with teachers, in communities of practice that they might held, in regular professional development that they were doing, which I think is really important. And also part of our sustainability efforts. There may be turnover at the state at any given time, but because we were building expertise in the community, it sort of outlasted myself, my former boss, other folks who were at the State Department in Louisiana. We created a lot of meaningful incentives for participation and improvement. So when we funded grants for professional development and technical assistance, for example, we also funded stipends to participate. And so when communities were holding trainings and professional development, they could both hire substitutes to cover classrooms with the money that we were giving. They could also do get stipends for the professional development. And then we have tax credits in Louisiana. There's a package of 5 of them. I won't go into too much detail because they're both unique, but also really important to our system, but a little complicated. But one of them is specifically for teachers. Teachers can get up to $3,000, actually a little more than that, $3,300 annually back on their taxes, and it's refundable. So even if they don't pay that much in taxes, they can get that much money. And we aligned sort of the ability to get that much money to being trained, getting a CDA that is based in making sure that teachers know and understand the importance of adult-child interactions and staying in the field. We also saw a lot of providers build incentives into their own programs, right? So they would build incentives into teachers getting improvement on the class tool. And we used our quality bonuses. So it's sort of like a tiered reimbursement on CCDF, but basically we would give providers a certain percentage more of what their payments were every quarter based on their quality rating. And frequently we would see some of that money being used to incentivize teachers to know and understand the tool and to perform better on it. We report publicly our ratings for programs on a website called louisianaschools.com. This is a birth to 12th grade website that provides information on the quality of care and education for all publicly funded programs, starting at birth and going all the way to 12th grade. And we don't just publish the rating and leave it at that. We have a video that explains the importance of adult-child interactions in family-friendly language. There's little links on the whole page that explain the difference between emotional support, instructional support, the pre-K and the toddler domains, and the infant too now. And so we try to make sure that we're helping families understand what we're measuring and why we're measuring it and what that means for the quality that they're choosing. And we built our teacher preparation programs for childcare teachers to be aligned to our quality rating system, meaning if teachers are going to go through any kind of preparation program to get a CDA, it has to be aligned to what we're going to hold them accountable to do in the classroom. So we make sure that those programs both are preparing teachers on the importance of adult-child interactions and how to be successful at them, and providing coaching on adult-child interactions, and while they're in the classroom getting this sort of preparation, getting this CDA. So I would say that all of these things are part of really embedding the quality rating system into the work that is happening every day for teachers and for providers. It is not something that's sort of layered on top and something, you know, you think about when you have to create your portfolio for, you know, for the year. It's actually part of like the daily infrastructure of what teachers are doing and what providers are doing. In any way, if we had a resource available to us, we were working really hard to make sure that we were in some way aligning it to what we had articulated was our vision of quality for birth to 5 classrooms. And we really tried to stick with that. One example of that is curriculum. So we had a really strong curriculum push, but we never pushed curriculum out as this separate thing from our vision of quality that we had articulated with class. Rather, we did a strong curriculum push, and we said curriculum was the basis of high quality adult-child interactions. So we tied it back to the work that teachers were already doing to improve their adult-child interactions. So that's just an example of how we were working to make sure that our system, our QRIS system, was sort of really integrated into the work that teachers were doing and providers were doing every day. Paula, I will throw it to you and see what you would add.
Yes, so I want to be very clear with something I said earlier. I said the industry was quiet. As many advocates on this call, as well as myself, we are not quiet at all. We have been yelling from the rooftops to legitimize the work we do. So I want to make sure I cleared that up. I think what class has helped us do, and I know me personally, what has helped me do is have conversations with those legislators and different representatives to say the data shows that this information, that this level of interaction works. So it has helped us be heard. I want to make sure we're clear on that. Another point I wanted to sort of touch on, Nasha, is that intentional training you sort of alluded to earlier. So that PD, it doesn't go in the black box, right? We're able to look at the scores and say, it looks like under instructional support, specifically around concept development, if we encourage a bit more analysis and reasoning, we're going to push children to think deeper. So I think when we can get to that level of detail to provide that level of intentional training, we're again able to see some improvement. So wanted to speak to that. And also my infant classrooms, as Nasha said earlier, and a center who has 16 classrooms, 4 which are infant classrooms. All of my infant teachers saw this rich, professional development coming out for our pre-K teachers and our toddler teachers. And I kept getting questions. Well, Paula, when is my tool going to come out? When do I get to go to this training? So like Nasha said, the infant teachers, they wanted it. They wanted to hear what they could do to make change as well. So it was something that began, it sort of shifted like, oh, I have to go to a training to, I want to get this training. So we saw a shift, which was great to see.
Yeah, I will say I have an infant now. I have a 6-month-old, and his teacher was really excitedly telling me, she was like, I don't know if your previous work, if you worked with class at all, but I got a 6 on my class observation and I'm just so excited about it. And so just like having that level of investment from teachers is something that really sort of reinforced the system, and I think contributed to both its impact and its longevity. Okay, so I want to speak a little bit to a question that we got in the chat box. So someone asked us if we use class scores as cut scores to get to certain ratings, and the answer is yes. So our quality rating system is 100% the class scores that programs receive in their infant, toddler, and pre-K classrooms. And so we rate programs, and there are 5 levels that go from unsatisfactory to excellent. And they are, of course, between that 1 and 7 range. And so what you can see here is work that was done by the University of Virginia as part of their research on our QRIS system, but you can see that we didn't start off in a place that was necessarily, where we are now. We started in a place where people hadn't, even though we had a QRIS before, we had ECHRS before, we had conversations about quality before. When we first started with the class tool, there wasn't necessarily that level of quality on the class tool all across Louisiana. And it took time, but because of a really, really focused implementation of this QRIS and an alignment of resources to improvement on the QRIS, you can see here that pre-COVID in 2018, 2019, we really got to a level of improvement statewide in terms of what you were seeing in classrooms. And that's really a result of focus on both like focus from the state, right? What we were talking about over and over and over again was adult-child interactions, but also focus at the community and the program level of like, okay, this is the vision of quality that's been articulated. How do we focus our resources? How do we focus our time? And how do we focus our limited amounts of capacity to help build expertise and understanding for our teachers and for our programs? And one thing that I will say is that this is not sort of any like sector drove this improvement. This was multi-sector, this was multi-age. And what we, what we can say about this is that the overall understanding of what it means to have high quality adult-child interactions in every corner of our state has increased significantly since we started this work, which I'm personally really proud of and give so much credit to folks like Paula and our providers and our teachers and our community leaders across the state who really embraced this and invested in it and invested their community and their providers and their teachers in making changes for kids.
Nasha, if I could just add, as a provider who really knew nothing specific to early care and education, I came into this industry as a 3rd generation childcare owner, but with an MBA. So I didn't have formal education around early care and education. So I didn't know what quality looked like. And Louisiana didn't have a system of quality back in 1999. So I like to say what has evolved since then was this journey of NACE accreditation and QRS or ITRS and ECHRS. And I will never forget the conversation I had with Jeff Nagel, who many of you all know. And I said, well, Jeff, I've got 5 stars according to ITRS and ECHRS. So I should automatically be 5 stars for, class. And he said, no, not so fast. And so you see this evolution, if you will, and really targeted interactions that take place when you zone in, or as our colleague Jessica would say, have class as that North Star. So I look at it as an evolution and really class allowing us to be so specific in our practices.
And if you go to the next slide, you can see that that this was really true across all of our programs, right? That we had childcare, Head Start, and public and non-public schools that were at the low and high ends of the system to start. And we saw the shift across all of our sectors towards those 5, 6, and 7 scores, which was really impactful in the community, right? So we'd never had folks saying like, oh, this is only for schools, this is only for Head Starts. We actually saw significant growth, the biggest growth in our childcare sector as well. One of the things too about a unified quality rating system that I think that is so focused and so simple that I think really helped our entire early childhood effort is that as schools were able to see the quality in childcare and in Head Start programs, this sort of conversation about we're separate, we're different, we can never be the same started to disappear, right? And there were more opportunities for partnership. There were more opportunities to build that birth to 5 pathway. And there were more opportunities, I think, for folks to recognize that the childcare programs were the entryway into the kindergarten programs, and how do we invest in every part of that pathway and not just sort of focus our efforts on pre-K. So I will say, again, because I see this question again, our quality rating score for programs, childcare, Head Starts, and public and non-public schools is their class score. That is how they get their rating. The Louisiana performance profiles also report on whether or not a quality curriculum is used, the attainment of CDAs by staff or degrees by staff and credentials by staff, the use of assessment routinely,
Ratios
and use of high quality ratios. But the thing that drives the rating, the actual rating that center schools and Head Starts get, is just the class scores. Great. So you can see this is a little bit more of a simpler view, but you can see that over each year, each sector made improvement, and you can see that the growth for childcare was really significant. And in no small part of that was the community investment in the childcare sector to make sure that there was training on class, there was coaching on class, there was professional development being made available. And that directors were able to get trained. They were able to be the experts in their own buildings. They were able to provide that level of feedback to teachers. The other thing I would say, we don't have the slide in here, but one of the things that research that UVA has done on the system helped us to know was that actually childcare directors changed their hiring practices as a result of the simplicity of the QRIS system. So when they were looking to hire teachers to come into their classrooms, they were looking for teachers that would be successful at having quality adult-child interactions, which is true of our high-performing centers for forever, right? Like they always knew to look for that, but it changed the hiring practices for some of our medium and low-performing centers, and we actually had sort of like positive attrition, if you will, over time in our childcare centers because of that focus, of that recognition of what the quality what the vision of quality was for classrooms in Louisiana. And so the need to sort of make sure that the teachers who were in these classrooms were equipped and were prepared to provide those kinds of interactions to kids. A number of folks have asked about family childcare, so I'll just make sure that I acknowledge this now. In the original vision of the work in Louisiana to build a unified quality system, family childcare was not included. So our work was really focused on centers, schools, and Head Starts. And the number of family childcare providers that are publicly funded right now in our state is so low, it's fewer than 200 providers that it takes subsidy. We know that there's significantly more, thousands and thousands more that are not taking subsidy. But when we were sort of starting our focus on publicly funded programs, we did not include family childcare in this work. A couple of years ago, we started piloting class in family childcare centers, family childcare programs. And what our data shows is that family childcare providers at this time, the ones who participated in the pilot, were starting at a level very similar to where childcare centers were starting when we started this work in 2015. And we've paired that use of the tool in the pilots with coaching from CCR&Rs, and the family, like I attended one of the family childcare network meetings, and I just heard this really strong embrace of the tool from folks who would start by saying, you know, I've been doing this for 20 years. I thought I knew everything that there was to know. I was like really like, okay, you can come and observe me, but you know, you're not going to change my mind on what I can do. And getting the feedback, having the like really sort of expert coaching, having opportunities to be, you know, to talk about the tool with other providers and to have sort of that group learning sessions really changed their perspectives on the opportunities that it provided. And we in fact had family childcare providers ask at the end of the first year of the pilot whether they could continue to be part of the pilot, ask how they could continue to get access to this coaching and these resources. Really wanted to be a part of the system. It's not all of them. It's never going to be all of them, but we did see a pretty significant sort of embrace of this work and a desire to be a part of continuous quality improvement, which we were really excited about. Great. So I think now, if it works, Debbie, we can open it up for questions.
Yes. Hi. The first question I'd like to tackle is just checking my notes here. Are the questions like some very technical questions? Okay, Nasha,
Sure.
about the class cut scores, and obviously you mentioned and I love the words that you use in your QRIS about improving, satisfactory, excellent. You can tell us what they are again, but like, how do you do the cut scores? Is it a cut score for the facility? Do you average all the rooms? Just kind of that technical part of it.
Yeah. So when we do our calculations, we take all of the dimension level scores from a building, and we average all of the dimension level scores together to get the rating. We also calculate a domain level score for every domain. And so again, we take all the dimension level scores and we average them together to get a domain rating. The one exception to this is negative climate. We don't include negative climate in the calculation. This came from a recommendation from Teachstone, where negative climate is really a flag more than anything else. It's typically something you don't observe. And when you do observe negative climate, it's more of a concern and something you want to address immediately. So it does not get included in the rating calculation. So what that does lead to, because it's a straight average across dimensions, is that the pre-K tool gets weighted the most, the toddler tool gets weighted slightly after that, and the infant tool gets weighted the least. This felt the most fair given the number of students in every classroom. So it's sort of like a backdoor way to weight against the impact on kids. It's also just very simple. We wanted this to be a calculation that folks could go back and calculate themselves. And in fact, I've had multiple providers come up to me and be like, I think Paula did this once. She was like, I'm trying to get at my rating. I'm missing some crucial piece of information here. Like, help me figure it out. Providers can calculate their own ratings because we use a very simple formula for this. And that gives a level of, again, transparency to the system that I think is really valuable.
I want to go back and talk a little bit about the 1,200 class observers, all right? And the question that was posed is, how many programs are they able to observe annually? And if you could talk a little, I think it might, you have a different community-based way of people doing these observations that's part of their regular jobs. You know, like I think this question is more directed toward, like, if you had a cadre of assessors and that was their job, and you know, how many could they do and all that. So just address the community work here in terms of the class observers.
Sure. So we have a local state observer system where most of the observations that go into the quality rating system or quality rating results are done by local observers. What that means is we say to every community, there's 65 in the state, so 65 parishes similar to counties. We say to every one of those communities, like, you're responsible for making sure every classroom, birth to 5, is evaluated twice a year, once in the fall and once in the spring. How communities do this is up to them. So in some communities, they choose to contract all their observations out to class observers. They don't want to do it themselves, and they're allowed to do that. In other communities, the early childhood coordinator does all the observations. They're small, they don't have that many classrooms. The early childhood coordinator does all of them. In some of our larger communities, it's a mix. Directors, coaches, district staff, principals, sort of all hands are working together to get observations done. You might wonder why somebody who's observing their own classrooms wouldn't just give 7s across the board. So we use a contract with our third-party observers. This is through the University of Louisiana Lafayette, to conduct observations in every site 50% of the classrooms in every site, and at least one per age. So let's say a site has 3 classrooms, 1 infant or 2 infant and 1 toddler. We would observe 1 infant classroom and 1 toddler classroom. So that means that 2/3 of the classrooms got observed in that site. That's the requirement. So we end up with about 70% of classrooms getting observed statewide every year. And you know, if you're a large site, you're getting a lot of class observations every year by the third party, which means that we're doing checks on our observers to make sure that they are being accurate and reliable in their observations. When we see inaccuracies, when we see trends of inaccuracies, when we see even one sort of flag for inaccuracy, we'll throw out the local observation and use the third party scores in their place. We provide that information to local communities as well, so that they can do work to make sure that their local observers are accurate, and to replace local observers where they are not, so that, you know, more of their local observations stay in the system. And we require that local communities do calibration activities once every semester with all of their observers, once in the fall, once in the spring. So we're trying to really make sure that that class lens is getting built among our observers. And we have even stricter sort of requirements on our third party observers to make sure that they are, you know, fully versed in the tool, they're accurately using it. There is a level of human in an observation system. And so we, you know, deal a lot with the human side of it. We have an appeals process, we do error corrections, we have re-observing protocols. You know, we had to build a whole system around what it looks like to have so many observations, literally 15,000 observations a year. You know, we have to build a whole system around what that looks like to make sure that the data is good. But what it means is that like literally 1,200 people did class observations in Louisiana. That means that people like Paula and her counterparts in Jefferson, people in, you know, Madison, people in Orleans, people in Calcasieu, every part of the state, there is like a knowledge and understanding of the tool. So nobody can get the class feedback and say, I don't understand, I don't know what to do with this, I can't use it to improve. There are people who are experts in the tool in every part of the state to help them make sense of the results and find ways to improve. Paula, what would you add to the sort of both of the parts that I just named?
Well, again, just how when we empower not only those directors, and I saw something in the chat around what about that turnover? What about the employer and director turnover? We invested, you know, the state said it's important for our locals, that our locals know better about their own area. And so we invested in those owners and directors. You don't see change within, typically our directors are our owners, and you don't see change. We've seen a lot of change, you know, in the state level or even at the local level. But those owners stick around, and they are the ones who now have the understanding of class. And so I just wanted to, you know, speak to that. I went to another, sort of pushed it to another level because I am a larger center with 16 classrooms, and I couldn't observe 16 classrooms twice a year. So I then empowered my teachers to become class reliable observers. And not only did that give them a sense of accomplishment, but wow, now I know what those people are looking for as they come in. And I'm going to be more intentional about every practice. And so that sort of lead teacher was then able to model what that looked like for her counterparts. So just to take it to another level.
And Paula has some of the longest serving teachers like in our state in her center. I mean, you have teachers who have been in your center for what, a decade?
29 years.
It's really incredible.
Thank you.
And this leads me to another question that was in the chat box about the incentives to early educators as part of the practice. I think you covered that, Nasha, when you talked about the tax incentives. That's really what you meant about the incentives for providers, right? Or
For teachers, for providers, there's also tax credits. So for directors who are directors at like 3, 4, and 5-star centers, they can get higher level tax credits. Providers get tax credits based on the rating of their center. They also get higher bonus payments, as I said before, which are quarterly bonus payments. I think too, like it's important to know that when providers get those quality bonus payments, they're not typically just pocketing them. They're frequently reinvesting it in their centers. So they're finding ways to pass that on to the teachers who are helping them get those higher quality ratings, which I think is, I think it's really interesting to see how our directors have become the folks who have really pushed quality into their centers, right? Our coaches help, our CCR and ours are important, but our directors are the ones who set the tone for their staff and their teams, and they're the ones who have really made just really significant pushes in their centers and in their programs to reach quality, to get to quality, to make sure their teachers understood how they could improve and give their teachers the support they need to improve.
Mhm, mhm.
So yes, when we talk about providers, we're talking about childcare centers that are authorized to accept subsidy. All of our programs that are authorized to accept subsidy have to participate in our quality rating system. We're also talking about any public or non-public pre-K program that takes public funds to serve kids, and we're talking about Head Start. So our system is really focused on the publicly funded providers, and it has a mandate to participate in the quality rating system if you take $1 of public funds. That comes from legislation that said if there's, childcare is education, it is care and education. And if a single dollar of public funds is going towards supporting, those programs, then there needs to be some level of accountability and understanding of what that quality looks like. And so that legislation really pushed to where we are now. The large majority of our licensed childcare centers are authorized to accept childcare assistance. So I think these numbers have changed. I've left the Department of Education, so I don't know what the exact numbers are, but in the past it was like well over 2/3 of the providers were authorized to take public funds. And so we're talking about 5,500 classrooms, about 1,600 sites.
Could you address, we had a question about, was there pushback when transitioning in the QRIS to the use of the class? And you did something very innovative, I think, and very carefully thinking about what a transition period to a new system, like a hold harmless year or so. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this work started in 2012 when that law was passed, and we did work to pilot our approach to unifying the early childhood system, building community networks, and then ultimately piloting a quality rating system. We didn't sort of get to the quality rating system part of it until 2015, meaning we didn't implement a statewide new unified quality rating system until 2015. So we were piloting the community network approach in 2012, 2013, and 2014. And part of that was building capacity around class, getting folks to try out the tool, learning a little bit more about this local state component to the work. And then in 2015, 2016, that was our first year of using class statewide, and we did what we called a learning year. So as Debbie said, it was a hold harmless year for folks to participate fully in the accountability system, right? 2 observations locally, plus the third-party observations, ratings were calculated and published, but we didn't hold stakes on those ratings for that first year. And I think when you talk about pushback, like, yes, there was pushback. There were stakeholders who asked us how you could have a quality rating system that was based on just one metric. Nobody else in the country was doing that. We had pushback from providers who, similar to something Paula said earlier, they were like, we are 5-star quality rated under the current quality rating system. Why are you going to change the system on us? We've made investments to become 5-star programs. We had programs who had never participated in the quality rating system who were like, what is this new thing you're going to ask us to do? Why do we have to do this? We went on a statewide tour and we talked about it. We took questions for hours from providers who legitimately had questions about what this was going to mean for them. And I think we worked really hard at the state level to answer questions as transparently as we could. We put out the resources that we could. We held webinars. We made calculators so that people could try to calculate their own ratings. We made the scores public as soon as we could. And we really tried to meet providers and meet the field where they were and recognize, like, this is a new and scary thing for everyone. And let's, all try to address what we can. And we took significant feedback on our protocols. We made changes every year for, I think, 3 or 4 years to how we were conducting observations, what we were requiring of third-party observers, what we were requiring of local observers. And we really refined the system to make it better and better each year to make sure it was meeting the needs of the field. So I would not say we got it right in 2015, but I think our process was right in that we were engaged in a conversation with the field. We were open to making changes on the go. And we really tried to use data. We tried to use the lived experiences. We tried to use systemic processes to make sure that what was happening was fair. What was happening was really capturing the quality of the programs, and that we were making sure that we were providing resources on improvement alongside our rating system. Paula, can you add to that?
I guess an idea that's sort of been floating around my head is just like the idea of equity. We talked about, maybe it was a question that came up earlier, and I just want to start with, like, as a center who, I wanted the best for every child that I served. I didn't care where that child came from, what that child looked like. I wanted the best for every kid I served. And there are other tools that have been in place that I kind of went through that were somewhat expensive. This tool, there was no out-of-pocket expense for me as a provider. I was given professional development. The way Louisiana structured it, these providers were provided with the PD, with different coaching, models. We were able to put this high-quality measure in place. Teachers were able to provide it, and we were able to bring in more children and provide this really excellent care, again, for every child. And so, I just wanted to sort of highlight that, we're a center, I call us the melting pot of Metairie. So it's called Jefferson Parish, and we're not all low income. We're not all high income. It's a mix of kiddos. And I didn't care who I was providing that service to. I wanted that high level. I wanted a rich language environment. I wanted an environment that was going to encourage thinking. And class really was able to sort of help us do that at an affordable, if really least out of pocket expense. And so I just wanted to sort of highlight that as something, for everyone to sort of think about.
I'm seeing some questions, and you probably are too, Nasha and Paula, about since COVID started last March, can you speak at all to the changes in protocols, or temporary or ongoing, how you've addressed that with the need for virtual protocols, or to just hold harmless on ratings for a year until that stabilizes? And Nasha, I know you're no longer with the department, so I will understand if you can't address that, but
Yeah,
anything you can say there?
I can't speak about what's happening now. I will say that in June not June. I'm not sure exactly when they were published, but we made the decision to do sort of a hold harmless rating for the last year, for when sort of observations got suspended in March. I will say that the pandemic really pushed us to think about, we were doing in-person observations. We have been for years. What are our opportunities around video observations? What are our opportunities? When we first started our system, we thought about doing video observations, and it seemed clunky, and we weren't sort of sure how to operationalize it. And there was a lot of value we felt in moving forward with an in-person system and sort of like pausing on the logistics of a video system. Mm-hmm. But I think the pandemic has really reopened that conversation, and given us an opportunity to be thoughtful about what that could look like in the future, and whether that makes our system more efficient, whether it, provides us sort of better opportunities down the line. So, I don't know what the current thinking is at the department, but I do know that question sort of got opened as a result of the pandemic. Sadra, I saw you come off of video, so yes. Do you want to share anything?
Yes, I did, because
I also have a few more questions for you, Cedra, so hang
Okay,
around
great.
for a while.
I just wanted to add that in conversations we had toward the end of last year around this exact topic, the folks in Louisiana DOE were trying to be as flexible as possible with programs. So if they felt it was unsafe or were not able to do live observations, they were allowing them to make a case for either video or what we called a remote live, where they would basically have the observer on a Zoom and someone in the classroom that was carrying the computer around to allow observations to happen. And they really wanted to encourage people to do what they could for the quality improvement piece, so that they would have scores that could be used in terms of coaching and continuing the support. What I think is impressive about Louisiana continues to be through this whole process and rollout is that you have been very sensitive to the field and have listened. And like you talked about, doing a tour around the state, answering as many questions as you can, doesn't mean that you don't hold to your standard or hold to the guidelines, but that you're listening and that you're taking feedback and making revisions and changes. And I feel like you've done that all along in a very effective way. And we're continuing to do that during this pandemic around the topic of doing the observations.
We talked a little bit about, the use of different tools, and specifically here we're talking about the class. We talked a little bit about the accountability metric, how you got to the score and where it placed you on the quality continuum and all of that. Cedra, could you address a little bit the use of the class tool as data and informing a CQI and reflective practice within the staff members of a facility or within a classroom itself? And what are the types of supports that are, we had one question about, well, what kind of a training do directors go to, So
Right.
just a little bit about the supports in using the tool as a CQI practice.
Absolutely. So I can talk about that generally, but I think Louisiana has some very specific examples of how they encouraged improvement. And Nasha, I know for the programs that had scored in the lower realms that it did trigger some professional development recommendations. And Paula, I'm sure you can speak to this as well. But we absolutely are, the whole goal in this is to collect this data and then use it to drive effective professional development and individualize that professional development for teachers. So we have, Teachstone has a whole array of different options for training of teachers. We have online options, virtual options that we've really beefed up during this pandemic period, as well as hopefully we can get back to some face-to-face training options and coaching in the future. For leaders, there are, like Paula talked about, having leaders in her program, and in Louisiana, there's a lot of leaders who do go through the full observation training. They may be doing observations and need that training, or she may just really want them to be able to talk in a really informed way with their programs and with their teachers and other leaders in their program. But there are many programs that just want leaders to have a good understanding of why adult-child interactions matter, what the research says about it, and then how, as a leader, you can be supportive of professional development around improving adult-child interaction. So we do offer the full observation training, obviously, if leaders want that, but we have other, online, a couple of hours of content that really kind of hits the key points of why this matters, what the research says, and how, as a leader, you can be supportive.
And I would just add to that, I think one of the really things that underlies how we made this sort of transformation in Louisiana is the fact that our QRIS was so focused and so narrow. So it allowed the leaders in our systems to be equally focused, right? We weren't saying go get 10 different, we weren't saying go get trained in 10 different tools, go get trained in 10 different things. We were saying go get trained in this. This is our vision for quality. This is what we want to see programs improve on. So you go get trained in this, and then you be a resource for your programs, for your teachers, and for your communities around this. And we've layered other things on top. Folks have become experts in curriculum. They've become experts in goals and in assessment and other things. But I think because our QRIS was so focused, even in the context of becoming experts in curriculum or experts in other pieces, they do it to further adult-child interactions and in the name of furthering adult-child interactions. And I think it makes funding this a lot easier, right? Because You're not trying to fund a whole bunch of different things. You're not trying to spread your money around. We're a poor state. Louisiana doesn't have a ton of money to give communities to go invest in professional development. So we really had to say, like, here's the one thing that we're going to give you money to go do. And communities had to then say, okay, we have these kinds of investments, either philanthropically or from our school system or other ways that we've been able to generate them. And here's how we're going to target them in this direction. So I think the thing that underlies this success and underlies this sort of like building of expertise at the local level was a pretty strong focus that was communicated from the state.
At the same time, I want to acknowledge how Louisiana really came through with a strong PD component and elevating the CDA as the Child Development Associate credential as kind of a baseline credential. If you're staying in the field and you're getting in this business, get your CDA, right? Whether you're in Head Start or school-based as a para, person or in childcare. And so you were, again, I liked what you said before about the shared vocabulary. You're building a vocabulary about competencies. You're getting people moving all together. I'm interested, did you have any stats or information about like the quantity of credentialed folks in the state with a CDA? Would you say that you've made big progress in that area too?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we now have, when we did our push around CDAs, we also did a pretty strong push to approve CDA programs. So we required them to meet a certain bar in terms of what experiences they were providing to teachers. Mm-hmm. And so, we started this with a handful of programs. We now have over 25 approved programs to provide CDAs, and they're both your traditional sort of like university and community college providers. They're also your non-traditional providers. Jefferson Parish, for example, is an approved CDA provider. So they're doing it for their own childcare teachers in their own community. We have CCR&R's, childcare resource and referral agencies, who are approved providers. We have nonprofits and some companies, for-profit companies, that are approved CDA providers. So we have, it really runs the gamut in terms of like who are our approved providers, but they're all providing CDAs at a certain level and with a certain focus on adult-child interaction. So I think that's part of our aligned improvement strategy, right? Is to make sure any TA, any professional development that teachers are getting, it is reinforcing this idea and helping them to be successful in the thing we're going to measure them on. That being said, it has been challenging to get teachers through the CDA programs.
Interesting.
And so we have been pre-pandemic, we were involved in doing some research on like, what are the things that help us get teachers through these programs? And we found that the programs that were most successful in getting teachers through them were paying teachers stipends. Like, we're paying them for their gas. We're paying them so that they could get care for their kids. We're like, essentially, like these teachers could not afford to attend these programs and do all the other things that they have to do in their lives, which is understandable. So I think there's some work still to do to like really make this the credential that every childcare teacher in Louisiana has, but it's certainly been the focus and the effort. And we've seen pretty good uptake. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I will say that it's surprising how challenging it has been to get teachers all the way through the program. Paula, I don't know if you have any experience with the CDA program in Jefferson.
Actually just enrolled 2 of my teachers a few days ago. And I'd just say it's a wonderful program, really highlighting class teaching strategies, goals, as well as developmentally appropriate practices, and a really rich class that wasn't really the case a few years back. So if anyone comes to me with a CDA from the new Believe and Prepare program, I know they are well poised to get in that classroom and provide some, intentional practices.
That's great.
And also one of the things that we started to do, and I think are pushing to do more of, though it's a little bit challenging, is so in Louisiana, we have this thing called Jumpstart, which is basically a way to give credits to high school students. And so we have 2 high schools in Louisiana where you can earn your CDA alongside your high school diploma. And they do the same things. They teach in the childcare classrooms or pre-K classrooms in their community. And they can graduate with a CDA, and the high school gets sort of, or the district gets credit for that pathway. It's not as highly rewarded because childcare is not considered a high wage profession, but it is something that we're working to increase the availability of in our state.
That's great. Let me see. I think we've answered all the questions. If you could just talk for a moment more, Nasha, and Paula, about what you think this effort and focus, how does it relate to how families are seeing the system or family involvement in this? Or you talked a little bit about an example of a family, saying, wow, this program's improving or whatever, but anything else you'd want to say? You talked about the online portfolio of the program that says the rating and other things that the program is doing that are, we have a higher qualification group, we're working at a lower ratio, those are other pieces of information that can go in the online portfolio. Is there anything else about the reaction of families or how this has impacted families?
Yeah, I'll take that question in a little bit of a different direction, and then I'll let Paula answer it. But one of the state's big new efforts is around what we call Ready Start Networks, or Community Networks 2.0. So it's basically saying, okay, we have the basis of our community network work where providers are organizing together, schools, Head Starts, childcare. They do work around what we call coordinated enrollment to make sure that families are learning about all of their options at the same time, and they're using sort of a unified application to apply to all their programs. We're sort of trying to push that work into the second phase of that and calling it Ready Start, where we're saying actually communities should define, what is your goal for access and quality in sort of measurable terms. How many kids do you want to serve? And at what level of quality across your program, and how are you going to get there? How much money does it take? What are sort of the steps that you as a community need to take to do? And our goal for this is that, this becomes sort of like, it can pass the neighbor test, right? Like in any community, you would know what your Ready Start is, what they're trying to achieve, and like whether or not you support their work. So I think when we talk about doing the Ready Start work, the thing that buttresses that, the thing that makes it possible, is that we have this quality rating system that, can define quality, can be measurable across all of our programs, and that we've seen growth and improvement on it. So we know sort of like it gives us, and it points us in a direction, it points communities in a direction, and it helps when we talk to legislators, when we talk to funders, when we talk to other folks, that we can, point to the level of quality that we have, point to the level of quality we want to get to, and that we can say like, look, if you invest your money, if you invest your funds, this is how we're going to try to impact families in your community, the people who work in your businesses, the people who work in your, who vote in your communities, all of that. So I think, the family impact is both at the smaller level. They can look up their program, they can see how their program is scoring, they can see where there are opportunities to improve, and they can have those conversations with their providers. I think also at the like more sort of holistic level, our unified quality rating system helps us drive towards a community level understanding of what early childhood should be, and how each community, like sort of community by community, people are going after making that a reality. So Paula, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, and I'd just say, Debbie, if I'm being quite honest, we truly do have some work to do around educating families around what quality looks like. While we have everybody on this call, everybody in the field, we know what the quality looks like. We've got the class tool to put it in practice every day, we still have a lot of work around educating families. And I think what Nasha spoke to, that Ready Start Network, that's really going to position us to deliver the information. And we start with delivering it to the businesses, who can then verbalize it to others and their employers. And this center is high quality. Louisiana Department of Education created, as Nasha alluded to earlier, a school finder. So it will have what quality means and so forth, but it's still a lot of work around educating families as to what it is and why it's important. Why do I need to choose this highly proficient center over an unsatisfactory, or one that's maybe not even rated at all?
That's really helpful. All right, so what we're going to do, seeing no further questions right now in the chat box, but I appreciate all of the interesting ideas and questions that we've gotten from the participants in this section. I'd like to go around and ask our panelists for a final word, a closing comment. Amanda, I'm going to start with you because you've been listening to this whole conversation, and your gears are turning, and you probably have a lot of ideas to share with us. What do you think about what we've been saying here today, and what would you elevate as points that you want to reinforce, or how would you wrap us up here, Amanda?
Thanks, Debbie. You stole my last question, which I was going to ask about the impact on parents and their thoughts on quality and expectations. But I'd like to put out there that for me, the class tool is about continuous improvement. And if we can shift the conversation from accountability to continuous quality improvement, everyone benefits. Of course, our children do, but adults benefit. Teachers get better at their practice. Parents are smarter consumers of early childhood education opportunities for their children, and that ultimately translates into the K-12 sector, of which I was a part of before. We know that kids who have really strong ECE experiences and are well adapted socially and emotionally tend to thrive and do exceptionally well in the upper grades. And so I would put that out there for the group.
Thank you, Amanda. Cedra?
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be a part of this. I just want to say that I have just entered my 11th year with Teachstone, and I feel the passion of what we do still when I listen to conversations about the importance, the difference that it makes in children's lives and families' lives when we focus on interactions. And we know how much they matter to us in our daily work, and it's just crucially important. So it continues to inspire me and states like Louisiana that have, I think, done this really the right way and have listened and have grown and adapted and made changes based on the needs of the field. I mean, while having high standards. I mean, I just think I'm so pleased that you were able to share the experience, and thank you all for being a part of this.
And before we wrap up with our Louisiana folks, I'd just like to say, when you close out of the meeting, you will get a survey to pop up. And I want to reinforce how Jonathan started us up with, please complete that survey and share your ideas about topics or feedback. We super appreciate it, and we do read them all. So now I'd like to turn to our Louisiana panelists. And Paula, how would you wrap us up? What would you like to say?
Again, thank you all for the opportunity. Everyone on this call, we are just passionate about the work we do. And for those who are just beginning to digest this and what it means, I just encourage everybody to take a breath and trust that while it may be overwhelming at first, not only this, but everything else happening in the world, that it is well worth it, and you will see the benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. And Nasha?
Yeah, I would say, I think there are lots of people who are doing this work. And so if anything here resonated for you, I'm always happy to talk. If I can connect you with other folks, in Louisiana who are doing this now, other providers, and, any sort of folks at any level of the system, if something sort of was raised for you, please feel free to reach out and send me an email, I'm happy to do that. And I also, I know that the Louisiana approach will not work for everyone. So if you have ideas to share with me as well, I'm always happy to hear them and sort of learn more about what different states are doing. So, you know, email inbox is open. Please feel free to get in touch and stay in touch. I think Teachstone folks are going to talk a little bit about the resources that are available, but I would say that they're great partners, and there's lots of opportunities to sort of make sure that the resources that are available meet the needs of your communities and your providers. And so, Sedra is a great friend, and I would encourage folks to connect with them.
And here's all their contact information. It will be in the slide presentation, which will be posted, and you'll receive a link to that within the next couple of days. And we'd like to thank everybody so much for joining us today and for all your great participation and questions, which really drove a very interesting conclusion to our session today. If anybody has comments, I see people throwing things into the chat box, and really appreciate hearing from all of you. And until next time, thank you to our wonderful panel and Sparks here, and for all your work preparing and for sharing the information that you did today. Super appreciate it. Goodbye.